Jason Horne-Francis. Not often you get a #1 draft pick. You normally put them in cotton wool and you just nurse them through, but then they want to go home and the destination's Port Adelaide. Where does that sit right now?
Well, we think he'll get to Port Adelaide. I think it hasn't been said like Jackson. He says he wants to go home to South Australia, but it's effectively, and their footy boss, Chris Davies, said he wants to come to Port Adelaide 100%, were his words. So Horne-Francis wants to go to one club and it's Port Adelaide. Now, in terms of how they get this done, that's the fascinating thing, and I'd be interested to get your take, Kingy, as a North Melbourne great. But what we understand and what we can tell you is that there's a deal being thrashed out at the moment between West Coast, Port Adelaide and North Melbourne. So it's a bit convoluted. We'll try and break it down for you as best we can. What it would involve and what it would result in is the end result. This is what people care about. The Eagles would drop from pick 2 to pick 8, but they would get a future first-round pick, which comes in a draft next year, which has got a lot of WA talent in the top end. Port Adelaide would get Jason Horne-Francis and Junior Rioli, so they're obviously chasing Rioli from the Eagles as well. And North Melbourne would end up, in addition to pick 1, which they already have, they would have pick 2 as a part of that deal. Now, some other picks later in the draft will be sorted out, and potentially a player as well involved in that mix. But pick 2, they'd have pick 1 and pick 2 in this year's draft, which is a fair result for them, given that they're losing someone who is a #1 draft pick. But at the same time, I would expect North Melbourne to be playing hardball, is probably an understatement, Kingy, in terms of how they would be approaching this, because this is someone they've invested a lot of time and support into, and he wants to leave after 1 year into a 2-year contract.
So is it enough, is my question.
Yeah.
So you've got to pick 1 last year that they've invested into already, and you lose him for effectively a lesser pick 12 months later when he hasn't dropped in value as a package. Is that enough?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? And it's
not much more you can do. You can only get pick 1. He's probably the only, and they've already got that pick, so you can't better the deal. So there's probably got to be more involved, you would think. Kangaroos would want more.
Pick 2 would be packaged up with some other deals. That stuff's being thrashed out, but pick 2 would be at the centrepiece of it. I'm not sure how much more you can give, and a future first as well, you would imagine.
Yeah,
but
is it better than getting pick 8 and something else? I mean, if that is possible to get picked.
But Port Adelaide might finish top 4 next year. I mean, if they get Horne-Francis and Rioli and these types, you're talking about Sava Radigalia, they still keep, that name still keeps rearing up. Maybe they finish top 4 next year, so next year's pick slides dramatically. Might be 15, 16, 17, around that mark. So I don't know. I don't know. I think the urgency for me is with Port Adelaide. When you look at their list, Boak 34, Dixon 32, Jonas 32, Mackenzie 31. So the ball's in their court. I know that we're trying to get other clubs involved to get a better deal done. We wait and see. I don't think the Kangaroos are as urgent as what everyone else thinks.
Generally, it's hard to please 2 clubs, let alone trying to please 3, Dicko. But I think there is some merit in that, because the West Coast Eagles, there's a lot of talk about go-home factor now with early draft picks. West Coast maybe think there's some Western Australians that they might be able to get a bit later in the top 10, and maybe for them, if they can get a future first, we know they're trying to also accumulate some extra draft selections to rebuild at their footy club.
What about Adam Simpson trading pick 2? Do you think that'd be seen by the locals?
I think you could sell it by saying, well, pick 2 is most likely a Victorian by the sort of the phantom drafts at the moment. So maybe if they could say, look, we don't want to draft a Victorian on the threat that he also might want to go home, maybe. But it sounds like there's still plenty to thrash out. But it sounds like there's some conversation.
Would you hold him to his contract if the right deal's not struck? You would hold him.
Absolutely. I mean, look at Tim Kelly. If you hold for 12 months, the Adelaide Crows right now are invested in Rankin. Next year they free up. You hear 2 people at an auction, far better than 1. I would. I think sometimes as a club you can be super strong and say we're not just accepting what a manager says. We're a footy club here. We're going to back ourselves in. You've got another year of contract. I'm not concerned that he's unhappy at the moment. You can work through that. We've seen that hundreds of times across the system. If the deal's not right, there's no need to do it.
So do you stop investing development into him next year? You just go,
no, he's an asset. He's one of your players. You go as hard as you can to then try and satisfy him next year, would be my thoughts. But I've got no relevance to this decision. But if the deal's not what you want it to be, it won't be done.
Well, that's a great segue. You said, is it enough? What is he worth, King?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have the exact. Look, it's a big investment from the Kangaroos. Pick 1 last year.
Yeah.
You know, there's enough gone wrong this year to say, right, hang on, enough's enough. As a football club, we're taking a stand. We're not just becoming the development ground for other clubs. We've seen this happen with the Gold Coast.
Yeah, but we've seen enough with Horne-Francis to be worried about what his attitude would be like next season if he was made to stay at the Kangaroos. Well, that's a concern.
OK, so you think that they've got to trade him because of his attitude?
I think it's got to be maybe considered.
He's not Tim Kelly in terms of how he would approach the next year. I think that much is understood. He wouldn't approach it, I don't think, from what we're hearing.
You've got one suitor, not two.
Yes.
There's a big gap, big difference.
Yeah, correct. But in terms of how he would handle it the next year, it's a bit different with Tim Kelly, would serve out the next year of that contract and wants to play because he wants to get the next contract that would set him up for life.
Tim Kelly originally cost pick 23 or something. This guy was pick 1.
Yeah.
Going to be the prime mover of your football club. That's a big difference to a spec pick.
Wherever he's going, he's going to get paid handsomely. I think that once this initial deal finishes. So I think he knows that that's what's going to happen and that's what's in his future. It's far more of a guarantee, I think, than what Tim Kelly had at the start of his football career. And when he went to West Coast, I mean, it was a lot different in that he was playing for his big contract. Where HorneFrancis, I don't think anyone's doubting his talent. But as you said, North Melbourne, and Brady Ruling said this to us at the trade launch on Monday, they knocked back a massive deal from Richmond for pick 1. They showed enormous faith in Jason Horne-Francis, and now you understand why they would want to play as hard a ball as you can to try and get the best deal possible.
His value is not dropping from now to next year. No. It's not. Okay. And there'll be more suitors next year. So if the deal's not right, it won't be done.
It's just rare air, isn't it? We're talking about a number one draft pick that you value so high that he's going to exit your footy club within 12 months. It's just, that's why you can't actually put, what is he worth? You haven't seen. But a number one draft pick is like just gold.
Yeah, exactly. And just quick, so as a North Melbourne person, I mean, how disappointed are you that this has happened? That he's going after 1 year, or he wants to go after 1 year at the football club?
Of course it's disappointing. I mean, pick 1's the best player in the draft. You're the poorest performed club. Things have gone downhill since he was selected. I understand why he would want to leave. I can see that. I understand that. We all do. We all sit here understanding that it's a challenge mentally for this young man in the position he's in. He's homesick. He wants to go home. But, you know, I just think as a football club, sometimes you've just got to say, hey, we're doing what's the best for us. And right now, the trade that's up for grabs is not the best for us. Get fair income with it or move on.